Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. Now today we're going to be talking about research. What research is, what does it mean, why do we need it? Research is a term that often creates a lot of snores and a lot of rolling eyes. I recognize that many of you kind of shrink back when we hear research. What does it mean? Does it mean we have to do a paper? Does it mean that we have to collect data? Who cares? None of this has any implication for my own life. Many times we think of these things when we first hear research. My job here is to start helping us get a better sense of what research means, how it might impact your life, and what actually goes into conducting research. So let's get started. So what is research? Research is how we learn about the environment around us. Sometimes we might observe people at a coffee shop to get a better sense of how people behave in a coffee shop. We might also observe people in a classroom setting to understand which teaching techniques work best. There are two kinds of research in the social sciences in particular that we're often worried about. For one, we're interested in trying to capture a moment. This is known as a time series analysis. So we might give a survey out once, or we might conduct a series of focus groups once within a particular week or a particular time frame. Time series analyses are concerned with measuring, collecting, and taking a look at data at one time, during one time frame. Differently, you may elect to try to capture data or observations over a long span of time. Could be over 6 months, could be over a year. So there are multiple times in which you will be collecting data for your research study. That is known as a longitudinal analysis. You may observe how media impacts children from the ages of 6 to 8 years old. That would absolutely be a longitudinal study. You'd have to check in with these children time and time again from when they turn 6 years old all the way through turning 8 years old. Another thing to note is what a primary source is and a secondary source. Now, a primary source is a source in which you are responsible for creating directly. And so directly, it may be you conducting a survey study, or it may be you conducting a focus group. It may be you conducting an in-depth interview. And through this, you would be the one to collect the data, to do the analysis, and to put out the study. That would be a primary source. A secondary source is when we rely on other studies. We may read up on other studies produced by other people about brand loyalty toward cars, for instance. So it's important to note what a primary source is and a secondary source. Generally speaking, in the social sciences, we rely upon secondary sources in order to conduct our own research study, which for us would be a primary source. And so I might read up on brand loyalty. I might read up on consumers' intent to watch television or interest in playing horror video games to build up my own study and to then do a separate investigation in order to learn more about gamer behavior, television behavior, whatever it may be that I'm interested in. Let's move along. What's important to know, though, is that research happens in a cycle. It's a perpetual cycle. It never ends. Please note this. Research never ends. It never ends. There is always something else that we can look at. And so here, even for companies like ABC and Warner Brothers, they don't do studies in a vacuum. Nothing is conducted in a vacuum. We are always thinking about what we know, what we want to know, and what we want to know after what we know is uncovered. If you're confused, let's go through this circle together. First, we have the secondary research review. You never want to go into conducting any kind of study without reading about what's already known. You and I will not be doing a research study on the Big Bang Theory, The Office, Blackish, Off the Boat, anything like that, without seeing, well, what studies are out there about the Big Bang Theory. If we're interested in how the Big Bang Theory may promote children in in pursuing science or pursuing scientific degrees in college, we want to make sure that there's no other study out there. If the study's out there, then maybe we don't do it. Or we may look at the study and say, well, the researchers conducted this particular study using a survey where they probably should have used a focus group component here as well. And so you might have those kind of internal discussions within yourself or among your other research colleagues in designing the study that you want to do. But you never, ever, ever start a research study without reading about what has already been done. Second is the primary research design. You've read academic articles, or if you're in industry, you've read industry articles. You have a sense of what we already know about ABC. You have a sense about what we already know about these TV shows, or maybe ABC is a client and they're telling you what they'd like to know. You go into the primary research design. At this juncture, we're most interested in creating a brand new study. We're interested in studying something new, something different. Okay. The third phase here is data collection procedure. We have to consider how we're going to collect data. It's great that we want to do a survey surrounding the Big Bang Theory and let's say whether or not the show drives up interest to pursue science among viewers. Fine. So that's our primary research design. For data collection procedure, if we're using a survey design, we might say to ourselves, okay, well, if we're going to use a survey, am I going to give it out online? Am I going to text it to people? Am I going to use a third-party company or vendor who's going to help me put out the survey, right? We do have firms in industry that are responsible for disseminating or sending out surveys to people. That's their bread and butter. That's one of the key focuses of their business. So data collection procedure, we have to think about how we're going to collect the data. It's not enough just to say, oh, I'm going to do a survey. Fine, but how are you going to get people to collect data? How are you going to get people to answer that survey? The next phase is sampling design. Sampling design deals with who are we sampling. So we might say to ourselves, okay, we're going to use a survey to learn more about these Big Bang audience members and their interest in pursuing science. Who are we interested in, though? Is it adults 18 to 34 years old who have been watching the Big Bang Theory the last 3 years? Or is it high brand loyalty fans of the Big Bang Theory ages 10 to 15? Who are we interested in? Sampling design gets into sampling frame. Your sampling frame is how you define the population from which you're drawing out the sample itself. So you want to think about, who are we sampling? Who are we going to talk to? That's of interest. Once all of this is determined, you then will shift into the data collection procedure or the data collection phase itself, in which you are actually collecting data, right? We know who our sampling frame is. We will pull a sample of 10 to 15-year-olds who are high brand loyalty fans of the Big Bang Theory show. We will pull them out to take the survey. We then enter into data processing and analysis. Whether you're employing an in-depth survey, or if you're employing an in-depth interview, or if you're doing a focus group, conducting an experiment, whatever method you may be using, this is the time in which you look at the data and you analyze it. You get a better sense of what you found, what you've learned, and how this advances your client's interests, your interests as a researcher, or even your interests as an academic scholar, wherever any of you wind up falling into. Report writing summarizes the results, the implications, and we get a better sense of next steps. You'll notice with this circle, it doesn't close. It keeps going. There's no end here. There's no end within this circle. And so it is perpetual. It closes right into secondary research review. That's the point of the scientific method. It never ends. And that's why you see all of these items on kind of a continuous loop. Science never takes a break, and neither should you. Let's keep going. What are some secondary sources for media and entertainment? These sources here are really, really good for all papers, assignments, other items regarding the entertainment and media industry. All of you should absolutely know these sources. One, The Hollywood Reporter. Absolutely start checking that website. Sign up for a newsletter if you can. It's the same thing with Variety. Both of these magazines, they're online, you can also get them in print, are heavy hitters when it comes to Hollywood and media. You'll be educated on different film studios, different TV production companies, places that you may want to intern. All of those items are chock full in these magazines. Additionally, I personally subscribe to a free newsletter from Synopsys. I highly recommend that you do this. Synopsys will send you an email daily about TV ratings, new shows coming out, new jobs coming out, new internships coming out. Synopsys is wonderful. You are foolish if you do not sign up for Synopsys. It is very, very useful and it costs nothing. And it will tell you breaking news about Hollywood, new TV shows, new films, new everything. It is really, really good. Another thing that is missing from here that you should also sign up for is The Wrap. THE space WRAP. The Wrap. It is a film industry newsletter. I highly recommend signing up for that as well. It is also free. Finally, for TV and film, we have Deadline.com. Deadline.com is going to tell you everything that is breaking in Hollywood, up to the minute. It is wonderful. I do my best to check this website as best as I can. I don't check it every day, but it is super useful if you want to know just what is going on in Hollywood at this moment. It's very, very good for breaking news. For video games, because this is another area of interest of mine, aside from researching TV and film. For video games, there is Kotaku. Excellent, excellent site for video games. IGN arguably is the best website for video games. And VG Charts. VG Charts is wonderful because that is where you can get sales data of video game consoles, of video games themselves. I never want to hear from any of my students that they can't find a source. That's impossible, especially with a list like this. These websites are rich. There's a lot of information on there. And really, for those of you who are really committed to making it in media, to making it in entertainment, and making it in Hollywood, you absolutely have to be familiar with these sites. There's no doubt about it that one way to really crush an interview or to crush your first impression with a producer or manager or whoever it may be is knowing your industry. I can't stress that enough. And so this is something you absolutely have to be aware of. When I have a meeting with a Bravo or a WWE or other companies that I've worked with, I do my homework before I even have a meeting with them. With any company that I work with, I always do my research. I look them up on Hollywood Reporter. I look them up on Variety before I meet with them. You want to know everything you possibly can about companies that you may work for or people from these companies you may meet with. And so it will arm you well during your interview or during your interaction with some representatives from these companies. And as I said earlier, these sources are wonderful for any kind of paper moving forward with media and entertainment. You will not be at a loss for information, I promise you. If you're still at a loss though, despite these sources, check out the New York Times, check out Wall Street Journal, check out Time Magazine. Among all of those sources, you should be fine in finding information out about anything in entertainment and media. Let's move along. So, in this lecture, as I stated, we're going to be kind of tiptoeing right into research. So, we're going to be covering a little bit about academic research and a little bit about industry research. It's important to understand the differences between the two. Some of you may go to grad school. The majority of you will probably be going into industry. And so it's important to get a sense of what industry research is like as well here. And so academic research is very, very tough. It is largely more difficult than industry research, though there are exceptions to that, of course. There are some industry research projects that are way more complicated and way more difficult for sure. In my own experience, I conducted market research at Ipsos, IPSOS. You should be aware of that firm in case you have an interest interning there. I was fortunate to do studies for CNN, Sesame Street, HBO, and a few others. And so that was a really, really great experience. But what brought me back to academic research is doing research that is very difficult, that is very conceptual, that is very, very interested in pushing the cause for society. Really, really thinking about what I'm going to find and how it's going to benefit society. And so we see this all the time with differences between academic and industry research, right? Typically it's priorities. We know in industry there's a greater interest in serving clients and getting numbers and not really spending a whole amount of time on research because quite frankly, there's a lot to do. We need quick answers because everything is business driven and we can't spend 6 months on a problem. Anybody in business would say that's ridiculous. One key difference between academic and industry research is that academic research seeks to advance theory and knowledge, whereas industry research is very much interested in realizing answers that surround actionable insights that allow clients and companies to move along with a particular agenda in mind. Let's go back to the slide that was posted earlier here. And so academic research, the goal is to advance theory and understanding about a human process. It is less driven by graphics and the look of a presentation. I promise you this is the case. Should any of you be so lucky or maybe so unlucky to go to an academic conference, you will see PowerPoints that will turn your hair gray and white. Academics, I don't know what it is. Many of us cannot create a good looking PowerPoint deck, but many of us are not motivated to. In industry, look, presentation, graphics, that's everything. Sometimes the look of a slide is more important than the information on it. I kid you not. And so it is very, very vital that you are sensitive to how your PowerPoints look. You'll also incorporate fewer PowerPoint slides, if applicable, in academic research typically. Research studies are presented at conferences and then submitted to academic journals for publication. There's also a longer timeline here. And so I'll do a study in academia. I'll do it maybe around brand personality traits of video game consoles, which was a former video game study that I did. So from doing the research study and then getting it published, it can take some time. And we'll kind of see that later on in some of the timelines that we look at. Let's move along. Industry research. Industry research is way different than academic research. So in industry, your goal is to understand consumer behavior with a particular product or service and/or test advertisements, maybe other communication to public or other businesses. And so you may be testing information for a public business, which may be a NGO, right? Some sort of company that's not necessarily part of government, but it's nonprofit. Or you may be working for a for-profit. It is extremely driven by graphics and the look of a presentation. You absolutely have more PowerPoint slides if applicable, and you are likely going to be delivering it orally, the presentation itself. Although do not be surprised if you work in industry and you create PowerPoint decks and you do not meet with clients. That is also very typical in putting together a PowerPoint presentation and simply sending it to the client and not presenting it. Reports and results may be written, but are increasingly put together in PowerPoint presentations. Microsoft PowerPoint really is the place in which most market research reports are now created, conducted, and disseminated out to clients. We also have shorter timelines in industry research, way shorter. Tougher turnarounds for sure. Let's move along. And so if we look at the academic research timeline, it's a little bit different here. First, you may conceive and develop a study. That does take some time. I can speak to this. I'm fortunate enough to have several publications in gaming, and currently I'm working on studies surrounding movie marketing and video marketing. That's your streaming video on demand marketing. And so I can tell you confidently that it certainly takes a few months to really conceptualize a study. You want to make sure it's strong. You want to make sure that there's some sort of generalizability or causality depending upon which method you're using to examine the research framework of your study. So that might take 2 to 4 months, no question about it. So you're developing research ideas, you're looking at theories, you're developing a literature review as well, which we will all go over later on in this course. Additionally, you might have to test your research instruments and test out data collection. So what you may wind up doing is a pretest in academic research. It's very, very popular. You want to pretest your survey. You want to make sure your survey makes sense. If your focus group makes sense. You know, I interviewed a bunch of video game players, but I didn't account for mastery of the handheld controller as part of the reason why players invest so much time playing Call of Duty. That's actually a thing, that video game players love mastering controls. I probably have to go back and fix my research instrument. In this case, my interview guide, the questions that I'm asking during the focus group. Maybe I have to go back and say, nah, you know what? I have to ask more questions about mastery of control here. Because when I pre-tested this focus group, I did not get into that with my own set of questions. It was brought up by other gamers. So from the pre-test of my research interview guide, I found that it was more important to talk about mastery of controls. So that's kind of one instance, this one example that I've made up that can kind of articulate why it's so important to test out research instruments. You want to make sure that you're covering all phases of a particular research inquiry. Third, you have the conference presentation. Conference presentation may take 3 to 12 months, and it's not because you're working on getting into a presentation and it takes so many hours and days and months and years. There are a few factors that go on here. For one, you may have a draft of your research study and you may be editing it for a few months before you submit it to a conference. Additionally, conferences in your area may not be occurring every month, and so research I'm working on in the spring may not be presented for another year. And it's nothing on me or the conference, it's just, you know, I only really go to 3 or 4 conferences, frankly. And so whenever the next conference is when I'll probably submit to something. And so generally speaking, you may not have an immediate opportunity to present the results of your study. Additionally, publication in journals usually takes at least 6 months to 2 years, probably a little bit more so toward a few years. Research that I had done executed in 2016 was published in early 2018. So there's definitely a longer timeline here with academic research. Let's look at the industry timeline. Industry is way quicker. Again, what we're concerned about is informing our boss about results from investigating a problem, or we're trying to inform our client after an inquiry into their own questions that they may have about audiences, content, whatever it may be that we're testing. And so to conceive and develop the research study in industry, I would argue takes about 3 to 5 weeks. It could be a day, it could be a week at some moments. There might be an emergency, there might be something that comes up for sure. And so it's very likely that people might be conceiving of research studies quicker and designing them quickly. What you may have here is what is called a client proposal. So you might have a proposal with a client. So you are working for the Stellar market research firm. Let's call it that, Stellar Market Research. You're working for Stellar. And Stellar might say, hey, Lauren or Bill, we just got a call from NBC. They're interested in using our services to investigate why teenagers are not signing up for NBC's app, right? Their streaming video on demand app. Fine, so that's an issue. You might talk to your boss and say, okay, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Let's do focus groups first and then a survey. Fine. So you might put that all together in a client proposal, and then you'll have a kickoff meeting. Kickoff meeting is your first interaction with the client. If you are in-house, you might meet with your boss just to discuss what you're going to be doing. So you might be tackling this in-house at NBC, or you may hire a third-party market research vendor to investigate this inquiry for you. And so here, you're going to be going over research instruments. What's in the survey? What's in the focus group interview guide? what are we going to be doing insofar as deliverables are concerned? Are we delivering you a PowerPoint deck with the results of the focus group, or are you simply using the focus group to test out concepts for your survey that you're eventually going to do? And really all you're focused on is the survey. You're kind of outlining what you're going to be delivering there. The second phase is data collection. Data collection is super, super quick in industry. It's very much turned around quickly, and so you may conduct data collection within a few weeks. What is of interest usually is quota adjustments. Do you have enough of a particular person, let's say? And so a quota is a certain number that has been predetermined. And so you might say to yourself, well, we gave out this survey, we don't have enough African Americans, or we don't have enough females, or we don't have enough Caucasians, or we don't have enough people that have signed up for NBC's app in our survey, and we really want to get a balanced assessment of what's going on in this problem. And so during the time in which you're sending out the survey, you're running your focus groups, whatever you're doing, or you're looking at tweets, however you're tackling this problem, you're kind of adjusting your quotas here. And you're saying, okay, well, we have enough Caucasians, let's go after African Americans. We have enough females, let's go after males. So you might be doing a little bit more tweaking in industry just to be sure that you're hitting your numbers. The third phase is data processing and report. You're going to receive the data output. Usually it's already been kind of cut for you insofar as having it in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. It's nice, it's pretty. By and large, you might only have to copy and paste the data results into PowerPoint slides. There are certainly other ways in which industry goes about churning out data, but that is one way to do it. Simply going into the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, copying and pasting information into the slides themselves, and that's usually about 1 to 2 weeks. It might even be a few days. It depends on the turnaround. And then you may have a presentation, although when I was in industry, it was far more likely that you would put together a PowerPoint slide deck and you would simply send it to the client. If the client had any issues, you'd have a conversation with them over the phone. You might add other results to the PowerPoint deck just to ensure that the client got everything that they wanted. If you can add a little bit more, if there were other findings, other things that were not necessarily germane to the focus of the study, but helps out the client, you might throw that stuff into the appendix as a result. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.